Hello guys, Dan here. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to show you how to paint John Hawkwood for the White Company. I'm going to paint him mostly with the contrast paints, and then after that I'm just going to highlight it in the more traditional ways. So without further ado, let's start. I started with priming the model with the gray Seer because I'm going to use a lot of contrast paints and I didn't want them to look too bright. I decided to prime it with the gray Seer. Just be sure here that you have like even coverage all around, and because the contrast paints are damaging the brushes, use some old brushes for these works, because over the time they will be really damaged and not usable anymore for some proper painting. I will start with applying Ultramarines blue, and I will apply it in one very thick coat, and I'm going to cover all the armor panels that I want them to be blue. And another tip, whenever I'm using contrast paints, I have to shake them really well, so like proper 1 to 2 minutes, because you will see they're going to separate and there will be some white things inside that's going to separate, so you need to mix it really well, otherwise it won't flow and it won't look that good. And now I will move on and I will use Flash Tearers Red for my red armor panels. So just be careful here not to go over the panels that you already painted blue, but in any case, if you made any mistakes during these works, just go back to gray Seer and do all the things from the beginning. For the black armor panels and the weapons, I'm going to use black Templar. In the case of the weapon, I'm going to apply it in 2 thick coats, so I will wait for the first coat to properly dry and then I will apply a second one over it, because I want them to be a little darker than the rest of the armor panels. For his face, I will use Guilliman Flash. So as you can see, working with the contrast paints is pretty quick, so you will just go one by one and apply them on the model. I didn't tell you that I'm using these paints straight from the pot, so I'm not diluting them or adding anything to them. And after that, I will use the Gore-Grunta Fur. This is another contrast paint, and I'm going to paint this base. So because I decided to make some gravel, but most of this will be covered by the snow, but anyway I'm going to paint it with the Gore-Grunta Fur. For the cutting edge of the weapon, I'm going to use a Nazdreg yellow, and same as before, it will be applied in one thick coat, just to be careful not to mix with any other paints. For this rock that he's jumping on, I will paint it with another contrast paint called Basilicanum Grey. It is really good paint for using on the rocks and stuff like that. And finally, the last contrast paint that we're going to use today will be Apothecary White, and this will be applied for his coat and all the rest of the armor panels that he have on his legs, knees and arms that are going to be white. So apply it in one thick coat, and because this is the last color that we apply on this model, you need to be really careful not to spill it around. And then I left this model for all these paints properly to dry. I think it took them more than 1 hour until I was happy with the look. Now I'm going to start highlighting. Since on the official art he have a white coat, for me I didn't want him actually to look like a doctor, so I used the pale blue, which is like a little grayish, like off-white, and I went back and I started painting the coat. Actually I painted like most of the areas with this color, except the recesses and the areas that need shadows. I left those areas with the previous contrast paint. Then I added a little white to this color, and I start doing the highlights. Here I focused only on the most raised areas of the folds, and I did a little highlight. Actually, it is like 90% of white paint and only 10% of the pale blue, so it's like almost pure white color when you're doing these highlights. So I went around and finished doing these highlights on all the cloth items and white armor panels, and at this stage I used the pure white just to finish off the highlights on the black armor panels as well. So I focused on the weapons first, where I did the edge highlight. So I used like in most of the cases a side of my brush, and I tried to make an angle like 45 to 90 degrees against the surface of the model and pull the straight lines. When that is not possible, I try to use the tip of my brush and just try to draw a very thin lines just to make this area distinguish and make them highlighted. So focus on this and just go around this model and try to highlight as much things as you can. So I highlighted his hair, and as well I marked the eyes. Then I moved on to start working on the blue parts of the armor. I used the turquoise, and I just went and repainted 90% of the areas that are painted with the blue contrast paint. Only thing that I was avoiding is going inside the recesses. So I was focused mostly on the raised areas, but everything that was in shadows and that was going inside the recesses, I just left it intact. I left a natural shadow for the contrast paint to remain there. Then for the highlight, I just added a little of the white into this color and maybe a drop of water, so I have a good flow. And I just went around this model and I did the edge highlight on all the blue armor panels. This is not a big highlight, it's a very light highlight, but focused like on the folds and on the edges of the clothes. On the sharp armor panels like the metal, just draw a little lines on the edges, and this will be enough to finish this highlight. To finish off with the eyes, I just pick up black and I just made 2 little dots in the middle. Just pick up your smallest brush with the best pointy end and just do a little dot. To finish off with the face, I use the Cork brown, and I just finish off the last highlights, focusing mostly on the raised areas like the nose, cheekbones and the forehead. To do the highlight on the cutting edge of the sword, I used the ice yellow, and I did this with a very thin line on the cutting edge, just to make a very little highlight. Just try not to go too deep inside the recesses or the area where it's connecting with the black part of the sword. One of the last details that we need to do on this model is to paint his red armor panels and draw the markings on his armor. To do this, I used the Evil Sunz Scarlet. First, I painted these armor panels that he have and all the LEDs on his armor with this color. And then I pick up my smallest brush and just did very thin sketches, and then later I draw all these lines again to mark these stripes on his armor. After that, only thing that is left to be done is to highlight these red parts. So for this I used the orange fire, and I just draw a small edge highlights wherever that was possible. On these small LED lights I just put a little dot in the middle just to create some little reflection. And now I'm going to finish off with doing his base. So I just pick up some leftover paints that are left on my wet palette that look like a bright gray, and I just dry brush it on the rock and on this gravel that I made on his base. So just be careful here when you're dry brushing, you don't want it actually to go on the rest of the model. Then I put a few grass tufts around the snow. I have some winter grass tufts. And then for the effects of the snow, I used a technical texture paint called Valhallan Blizzard from Games Workshop. And I just used my modeling tool and then carefully spread it around all of the model base. And of course the last thing that have to be done here is to paint the rim of the base. I always paint my rims in the black because that's I found how they look the best on my models, but if you have any other preference, feel free to change the paint. And that's it, guys, this model is done. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any suggestions or the comments, or you would like to see me painting something else, please make a comment in the section down below and I will try to do my best. This will be all for now, guys. Stay safe, take care, and see you soon. Bye bye.